format allow me to use my
live streaming is on.
Hello, world. My name is Gerry Fialka. It's January 10th, 2021. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Clinton Ignatoff, our facilitator, and McLuhan Wizard mashing up with the great Robbie Du. Robbie Du, Venice, California. We are happening. This is it. This is where we what do? We reinvent McLuhan so that the layperson can understand it and not be flobbering around in media ecology big words. Okay, sure. Gentlemen, really easy, simple. We'll start with you, Rob. How much news do you consume a day, just approximately? Ooh. And then on Wednesday, January 6th, tell us if there was an increase and about how much.
Yeah, I usually begin the day, like so many Americans, by reaching for my precious and flipping through the day's highlights and headlines. And through the course of the day, I'll get little notifications. You know, it ends up being a couple hours a day, but it's spread out little 5 and 10 minute stops. I mean, God forbid a stoplight is time that's wasted. I got to look and see what's happening in the world. On Wednesday, yeah, I was watching that transpire. I was not as verklempt by it as the rest of the people were. I sort of expected something like that to happen. I was amazed at how many people were so flabbergasted. My news consumption did go up. I tried to digest the thought that was coming out. Of course, the New York Times, the Atlantic were cranking out think pieces on the whole event. And it's interesting to see the discourse. I mean, this is a function of our media. It's not just the event itself. It's the discourse that arises from it. And it'll be an echo chamber on the left and it'll be an echo chamber on the right. And
wow. Rob, that was good. Let's keep it moving because you said so many great words. Echo chamber is something that the layperson can relate to, and discourse is what we're doing. We'll come back. Let's just get the brief answer from Clinton because he's in Canada. Mm-hmm. You know the question, Clinton, how much you consume per day and how did it change on Wednesday?
Apart from flipping through the National Post, some mornings my news is a few hours a day actually, which is probably pretty heavy compared to some people, but lots of times I do just am lazy and will rely on, a couple different internet commentators who go through a whole bunch of news in a rush, right? Yeah. I proxy out the work. And as long as you've got a good spectrum and you try to stay balanced, I think it's a good way to pay attention to news on the go. Yes, I was a lot more glued to my computer on the 6th. Certainly was. And most of it is actually following Twitter. Yeah,
let's leave it there because this is the follow-up. So I wanted to tell you, mine increased, and my brother was a good example. He saw the speech at noon, saw the hearing start at 1, from 2 to 2, 12 hours. He sat there glued, and his wife stayed till 4 in the morning. The delivery guy I encountered on the street, I said, hey, what'd you think about those Capitol events? He said, every person I delivered to was glued to the set. Yeah. So it's like an amazing
highest rating ever on CNN, higher than 9/11, than the impeachment, than
ratings is a good word. That's a common person's word. Now, just briefly, Robbie, how did it make you feel? Not think, because you said a great word. Discourse is thinking. How did this thing, once you saw it, how did it make you feel?
I was bemused by it a little bit. I thought that they were clownish, and I said I thought, didn't I? I felt.
That's good though, but that's good. We'll keep going. Okay, Clinton, you're in Canada. You're not an American, right? You're a pure Canadian citizen. How did it make you feel? How did it make you feel, Clinton?
Oh, I'm a pure Canadian citizen, but I've been watching American politics for 20 years.
Yeah.
It made me feel tense at first, and then however, the utter, it was so underwhelming that it became kind of a farcical. I'm more worried about the reaction to the event and the framing of the event as something more than a bunch of frat boy, like 0.1% of a crowd consisting of frat boy weirdos storming a building to take selfies for a few hours and then leave with basically very little else happening. It was a non-event itself, but how the story is going to change and how I'm not sure how the news networks framed it, because I was watching it through people streaming directly over the internet and the photos that were being taken, and watching the sessions in Congress directly streamed from C-SPAN or whatever. So I'm not sure how it looked from television.
Well, look at this. This just print medium for a second, because Marshall was deep into, we look at the newspaper and it's like a warm bath. It doesn't matter if it's saying 9/11 or January 6th or Kennedy. It's just this newspaper. And the New York Times did an amazing thing. Look at that. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 headlines for newspapers and magazines across the world. And my favorite is Trump legacy on The Economist, which is great. Has the guy with his feet up on just another clownish picture, frat picture. But they go through a range. Insurrection at Capitol. Trump incited mob storms U.S. Capitol. That's LA Times. New York Times. Trump incites mob. Now, let's stay. Now, you guys can go in these tangents and keep sussing this out. But I loved hearing Colbert, which I don't really consume, but my wife does. So we watched him interview 2 government people. And one of them said, a representative said, politics was invented to prevent violence. Now, that's what we study. Why do humans prevent things? I mean, excuse me, politics was.
Why do humans prevent things? That's the real idea.
But it's like this. Like, what a
entropy. Just, we were all gonna...
But it's politics was invented to prevent violence. I mean, that was, I thought, an interesting statement. I says, well, that's what we study, human inventions. And why do humans invent things? And then what are the hidden psychic effects of not the intention of the invention? So let's start really simple. Politics. What does it enhance or intensify, Robbie?
Social status.
Nice. Clinton.
Yeah. Like rhetoric.
So notice, I love the pause before the answer. You guys are masters and I appreciate it. I'm a student here. He goes, Clinton had that little pause, and that was the answer. And then rhetoric was flushing it out more. If you study Marshall's tetrads, which are amazing, but it doesn't mean they're right or wrong. They're poems and hieroglyphics. So here's some of the answers from our group. Peace, conversation, a lot of bullshit, the public, the father archetype. Whoa. Okay. Rob, what does politics render obsolete or displace?
Real negotiation.
Nice. Okay, Clinton.
Well, it's got to be. I'm thinking like hereditary lines or nobility, something like this.
Yeah. Hereditary lines, nobility.
Monarchism, I guess, maybe is the word I'm looking for.
And
I'm
yet
pushing
we
out.
had 2 Bushes. We almost had a second Clinton. We might get
Yeah.
Trump, 2 Roosevelts.
Very good pattern. And so here's some of the pennies was confusion. It renders obsolete riots. Working it out as individuals. Privacy. The overt kickback.
Only the overt one. We still take these
Okay, Rob, what does politics retrieve?
tribal council.
Nice. Tribal council. Okay, Clinton.
That's really good. I have to pass. I can't think
No,
of something.
that's good because people have to realize you don't have to have an answer. Passing is the answer. What does politics retrieve? Passing. You understand that? That is an amazing answer. But here's some of the answers we got. Clear objectives. Tribalism clans. Right up there, Rob. Joel, distraction as entertainment. This is the great politics is a branch of the entertainment business. You've known that from day one.
It's PR for the most unscrupulous,
Exactly. And the campfire, of course. Rob, what could politics flip into when pressed to an extreme?
I resist the all-time ultimate extreme answer, which is fascism or Big Brother. I'll resist. Yeah. It's just a pinata dangling in front of my cerebrum. Utter connivance.
Very good. What's another word for connivance?
Manipulation, scheming.
Yeah. Now, that's because you're one of these people who know how to dig deep into the tetrad. Let's really understand that fourth step. What does it flip into when pressed to an extreme? There's 2 things. Give me a service of politics if pressed to an extreme, or what could be a service?
It would settle disputes and make decisions for the collective good. That would be a service. A disservice would be that those with more political power would sway political decisions to their personal benefit, which is, of course, the system we have now. Or not, and by those, I don't just mean individuals, corporations, of course, as well.
Yeah, good. Okay, Clinton, if you take politics, press it to an extreme, what might it flip into?
I'm thinking balkanization or secession.
Right. So put that in lay terms. What is that?
If politicking as a verb politics pushed to the extreme could lead to the fracturing up of a country into smaller states.
Yeah. Now, go ahead, Rob.
As a Canadian, Clinton, if Canada was given the opportunity to annex individual U.S. states, which ones would you most? What's your top 5 U.S. states you'd like to be a part of Canada so you could visit freely? And who would you let in?
Who would we let? Well, if it were up to me, I've always liked to go to Michigan.
It's right there.
It's right there.
Vermont would be a good Canadian state, I think.
Probably.
No, California. No, you don't want SoCal. I would have thought Washington, Oregon.
Yeah. Oh, you want to build a chain right down?
Yeah. You could drive to the beach. You could drive to beach on honest Canadian soil.
Go ahead, Glenn. What?
No, I was just saying, yeah, sure, we'll take all the coastal real estate we can get.
Yeah.
Very good. So here's some of the answers we got. If you press politics to extreme, it could flip into anarchy, nepotism, the Republican Party, abolition of politics. Yeah. And in any ways, You guys did great. I just want to start with a little playful game. And really what I want to dig into, and Clinton, you can start by, there's so many issues in this one line that I've used so often because people tend to say, well, McLuhan wasn't really political. And if he wasn't really lefty. And, lefties sort of want to say, like I've talked to Tom Hayden about Marshall and various people and in Paul Krasner and, good lefties, progressive lefties. But this is such an amazing statement Marshall said in 1969 in his book, The Interior Landscape, which was co-edited with my friend's dad, who's from Canada. And nobody knows this guy. And I tried to interview him for years, and then he died. And I kept saying to Chris McNamara, I says, we got to interview your dad. Just ask him about these questions. And it's so sad. But it's called it's The Interior Landscape. It's Marshall's book of literature criticism. And here's what a question. Why must we continue to mow down the Kennedys in order to illustrate that the hot politics of old machines won't work on the cool and involving media, a TV medium? So there's so many major thoughts going on there. And the hot and cool is what I would love Clinton to suss out what that means, and Rob has taught it too. But for me, I've always been stumped by Marshall saying hot and cool because it seems like it wavers. Cool is increased involvement, hot is decreased involvement. But let's start with this. Why must we continue to mow down the Kennedys? I thought, why must we continue to whap security guards over the head with fire hydrants and kill them? That guy, these security guards in the Capitol were just like, they weren't like hardcore military cops. They're like just security guards. Why are you guys beating these guys up? They're like, they're not, that was just, so why must we continue to mow down anybody? And then in order to illustrate the hot politics of old machines, and then we'll go into TV medium. But I basically would love Clinton to start off, and then Rob, what does this first half of this question mean? Why must we continue to mow down the Kennedys in order to illustrate just that part of the question?
So let's see, there was hot and cool. So if you wanted to know those terms, it would be he's taking two forms of artistic interpretation, and he's moving it onto the media itself. So sometimes the content is obvious and straightforward and hot, and sometimes you stand there and the purpose of the art sort of comes to you as you get involved and you feel the art, and it changes you in an evolving sort of way, and the meaning of the art isn't blatantly written on it, but is instead more of a process that's evolving and changing you, right? So Pierre Elliott Trudeau was a cool television prime minister in the 70s because he was intriguing and kind of sly, and he would speak he would speak elegantly, but sort of he wasn't very direct. He'd crack jokes and stuff, and you'd be like, wait, did he just say that? Right? Compared to a figure like McLuhan talks about Charles de Gaulle in his time, who's just so blatantly over the top. He's clownish on television and just very direct, right? So right, as soon as you see the guy, there's no mistaking him for someone else. Cool people have charisma, and McLuhan defines charisma as looking like a whole bunch of other people all at the same time.
Wow.
Just elicits this familiarity sense, right?
And I guess hot and cool would depend on the medium you're being absorbed through. So like you could be hot in person, which means you could be warm, maybe affectionate, and you're open, whereas someone who's cool is more reserved and sort of doesn't say a lot, doesn't offer opinions so free. And so like a circus spectacle would be hot because you don't think about it. It's just, wow, that guy just flipped through the air through fire. And any kind of drama, televised or screened, would be cool. Or does a movie theater flip into hot because you're involved in the space?
Right. McLuhan always wanted to make the point that the medium itself was the more important thing that's changing you as to whether it's hot or cool. So a movie with a linear plot line would be hot, but then presumably a newer postmodern discontinuous or French art film style film that's where the story's told backwards and the character has amnesia and you don't know what's happening or something would be a lot cooler in its content, but they're still both very hot because you're in a theater, you got this thing right in your face, and it's a constant image just burning into your face at 24 frames per second, as opposed to cool raster television lines of your little 16-inch black and white television sitting in your living room. Yeah.
Hold on one second, because this is amazing. You brought up movies so astutely, Rob. And Clinton is in Understanding Media. He says movies are hot because they're about vision. So hot is more eye-oriented, especially silent films, because cool is more ear and hot is more eye. And silent films, then like radio, photography, and films are hot because it's decreased involvement, increased description. These other things like TV are cool because it's increased involvement, decreased description. So my brother watching 10 hours of January 6th was more an effort for him to determine meaning. And it wasn't it increased everybody's involvement because for some reason they wanted to know meaning. So this is, go ahead, Rob.
Well, going back to the question you asked me, how did it make me feel? I felt a little detached from it because it did have a theatrical like element to it. Obviously the clowns and the costumes and so forth, but it was so demonstrative, and it just was like, I figured something like this would happen. And so I was objective looking at it and not experiencing it emotionally, or at least not as emotionally as most other people seem to. It felt performative.
Yeah. Yes.
And just as the speeches in the House were prior, Mitch McConnell and I believe Schumer, and maybe they got to Cruz, were quite performative. And, especially for Cruz, who has larger aspirations, this was a big stage for him to get a nice PR moment in, and so the other thing that I thought too was, and the really bad side effect of all that is that, humans are mimics, and for them to think something is possible, they have to have seen it. And so now forever, the U.S. has had an attempted coup that made it to the halls of power. However clownish and, obviously complicit guards, the Capitol Guards were, at least some of them were complicit, all those factors in. But, this is now a permanent moment. And now some of those men will become martyrs, or at least heroes to the cause of on the right, and villains and traitors on the left. And we'll be living with this for a while, in this event and the rollouts. And it also, just the fact that Americans got to see it, got those images burned into their eyeballs, meant that they knew it was possible. And you could say, if you want to say events precede causes, that then this was almost like a dress rehearsal, a sloppy one without a director, but it seemed to me a potential dress rehearsal for a future and more serious fascist threat.
Yeah. The two of our members said in our discussion group said, we knew this was going to happen on this date. And we knew that there was already talk of an airplane was going to crash into the Capitol that day. Like, did either of you hear that? I was like, what? They go, oh, yeah, that we knew about that. And that's like, you know, that's pretty intense because, I mean, we could get Bob Dobbsian for a second. And if you see the footage of Trump saying, I love you, you're special. How could you not see that? He was really being true blue Trump. If you saw the footage the next day where he condemned the violence, it looked like an organic robotoid Trump. It was a different looking person. The lighting, the way he delivered. Who is behind this guy pulling his buttons and telling him what to say? So, I mean, talk about performance art. So, you know, you really brought it to the sense that I'm trying to get you two to really get deep into, because it's the first part of the sentence. Why must we continue to mow down the Kennedys in order to illustrate? Illustrate is a visual sense, right? Then it goes into hot politics of old machines won't work on the cool involving TV medium. So we almost skipped ahead, but I'm still after, you know, why did McLuhan say this? Why mow down Kennedys to illustrate? Go ahead, Rob. Yeah.
Clinton, we've been talking a while. Did you want to jump in on anything?
Yeah, I've got an because I definitely try to read across lines and have done so for 15 years. I've always got a problem with conversations about which sort of frame the fascist right narrative a little too easily without considering the massive corporate merger that's about to happen with the state, ideologically speaking, in the incoming Biden administration, and how the right sees that as precisely something of a fascist threat from the left, so to speak, and then that's a very uncomfortable conversation no one wants to have on the left, and that's precisely why the universe of this America is fractured into these two rival causes, right? Occupy Wall Street, for instance. All the bad guys are now the good guys, right? Within like 5 years. Now it's I get the sense that the Hillary Clinton campaign was such a guaranteed pure win that the Trump upset ruined a whole lot of big money plans for the Hillary administration after 2016. And so if you want to look at what big business and what the elites wanted to do, all their money was staked on Hillary Clinton and she lost.
Mm-hmm.
That retribution towards that upset itself, what has been directed at Trump and his followers for 4 years in ways which has been a little overbearing and heavy-handed, and that sort of occludes the equally totalitarian proclivities which the left are capable of, and which we might be witnessing in the upcoming year as Biden becomes president. That's my worry as a Canadian looking down. And I mean, no one talks about this amongst the circles that I hang out with online when it comes to the McLuhan stuff. So I figured I'd throw it out there, see what the response was.
Yeah.
Well, in response to the Kennedy assassination, I always thought that was also very performative. Mm-hmm. I mean, if your objective, your sole objective is, and I don't buy the cover story. If your objective is to take out a president, to kill him, what a performative way to do it. You know, with multiple sniper gangs from different places, you constructed a patsy. The driver was probably in on it as well. So wouldn't you poison the guy? I mean, he did have a great, and so it begs the question, was it done for performative purposes? Okay. And you say, so this quote, why must we continue to mow down Kennedys? Mowing down a Kennedy is sort of the mafia taught the CIA that when you identify a hero, amongst the peasantry, or even worse, like a middle class person who has standing, who then takes up the cause of the working class, or seemingly does, and becomes a hero. You whack that guy straight away, because that kind of person is dangerous to you. And as they grow, they build. And most of the Democratic candidates over the last 20 or 30 years have had a bit of that. I mean, I don't know how much of a hero of the people Bill Clinton was, but they had this veneer of charm, intelligence, both of them very smart, good speakers, so on and so forth. So they just, mowing down a Kennedy is like saying your heroes aren't coming to this hall of old white men, and the Kennedys represented, they were sons of bootleggers. They represented, illicit America rising to the greatest halls of power. Let's be honest,
Irish Catholics too, man. That's a rare,
like Joe Biden. I mean, it's an interesting symmetry there.
Yeah. But Rob, you grabbed it. Clinton, you want to add or what?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that what's being illustrated by every time Kennedy gets mowed down is that McLuhan says, the hot politics of the old machines won't work on cool and involving TV mediums. So I guess assassinations, when you didn't see them, were much more effective. But in the cool and involving TV medium, everyone's horrified and traumatized, obviously, when you see a political assassination on your television set played out live, I assume, right? So every time Kennedy gets whacked, it's a reminder, hey guys, like we're in a new information landscape or media landscape where people were really invested in these politicians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to imply that no one cared about politicians getting killed before then, but there was something new about the medium itself.
Clinton, hold on one second, because Clinton, when you say to illustrate that the hot politics of old machines, what does he mean by old machines there?
So The Mechanical Bride was about the outgoing industrial age of hardware machines where people thought of themselves as being a cog in the machine. Everything, all people's metaphors for themselves were machinic, right? I have drives, I've got, I'm on track. Her and I are compatible, or we're not compatible. He's well adjusted or he's maladjusted, right? So that was machine culture, which television erased and turned it into, vibing in the groove, hippie, spiritual, new age sort of culture with its discarnate involvement, electric involvement. So the hot politics of old machines is totally different. You had like, communism and fascism, obviously, and the liberal, that they just weren't, that style of politics wasn't going to hack it in a world full of TV. Just whatever it was about those politics in that machine time.
Interesting. It makes me wonder, is the internet an even cooler medium than TV because it is so much more involving and meditative, or is it hotter because it's so immediate?
Because it's interactive.
Mm-hmm.
Cyberspace is how I like to call it, because people never use their computers until they're sitting down. They're like running a computer program, right? You're not using the computer when you're using a computer. You're using the fake word processor or whatever, right? So, but as a medium, it's so involving in its interactivity that I would say it's ultimately cool. However, the content is so real that it runs the whole spectrum. It depends how you use it. Sherry Turkle's doing ethnographic research on children learning computers in the 80s. Notice that, as all these kids are learning computer programming languages in the 80s, some of them are programming in a style she called hard, which was like planned and top down and logical, where you figure out how the whole program works and then you just type it out and it all works as one machine. And other kids were programming in a way she called soft, where kids were like experimenting and trying stuff and making it up as they go along and taking way too long to do something that was really obvious, or like, playing around. And the program was kind of like a hodgepodge piece together experimental thing that they built up from pieces, right?
Interesting.
And so she was classifying typically women were the soft, involved programmers, and typically men were more top-down, hard programmers, right?
Mhm.
So that just suggests that the versatility of the medium allows it to be a hot or cool medium, but also then facilitates hot or cool uses depending on a person's orientation.
Well, it begs the question: would a Kennedy mowdown be effective then on the internet? I mean, I guess what we'd say is no. I mean, it's too cool. Or I mean, we would have the opportunity to re-experience it over and over again because there inevitably would be camera footage. And I think that the reaction even to the event on Wednesday changed. The initial footage that was shown was from the corporate media, and it tended to be outside. And then later on, they got the cameras inside the house, and they got the individual citizen journalists, some of the rioters, and they showed their footage. And we saw that there was some real violence, and there was some ugly stuff that went down beyond the clown show. And yeah, so I don't know. How does the internet respond to a Kennedy killing?
Well, that's it. Actually, I think it's a totally different experience when you go and when you see something live on the internet that day, like I did, and then when you try and reconstruct an event after the fact by going and trying to find the clips of that day and reconstruct it, it's always completely different. The reconstructions never have the very similar, they never feel as real as having watched it unfold. Even if there's more facts that come to mind later, everyone has their instant impression mind made up watching it that day, compared to had I been living under a rock, or had I been had I been like under anesthesia for 3 days, and then I woke up and I tried to figure out what just happened on the 6th. It'd be next to impossible to put together for me. I probably wouldn't even bother trying, at least if I to a level that I felt sure about.
And you know what? Looking at the old clips, you don't have the same emotional reaction. You don't get the same percepts because, number one, you know this is an event in the past, so you don't have the urgency, and also, it's just you're looking at archival footage. Oh wow, that happened. I didn't know that. And it has this different perspective. I was also going to say, getting back to the Kennedy question, in order to illustrate, I think what he's also saying is, and we haven't had a good old-fashioned political assassination in a long time, and I think that maybe, well, we've been doing it to other countries, and so forth, but I mean, in the U.S., I think what he's also saying is that they take people out other ways, through imprisonment or through PR. The blunt act of just your hero is not coming into our house is just that. It's a bit too blunt. And in the media age, it's far better to discredit someone, to isolate them, to reduce their import through more nefarious means than to blow their brains out. It's just too hot.
Definitely, yeah.
Really well put, Rob, because you're digging deep into this, because we could go 2 hours on this. The fact that Marshall asked it as a question, he's saying, I'm not going to blatantly be a political activist, even though his experimental film was a political act. His 12-minute experimental film that he made with the woman who fought the bad guys in New York, amazing, was political. But most people don't know this and don't hoik it up. But this question, he's saying, I'm still stuck, and I'm glad you're really dissecting it. The hot politics of old machines. So you're saying we watched the Kennedy assassination on an old machine, or I'm not sure. No, I'm all mixed up, because you're saying you're taking the quote and putting in the net world. That's good, but I'm still mixed up. I realize that Clinton explained what old machines won't work on the cool involving TV media. But in essence, we're watching January 6th. My wife and I, Susie, were watching it live on her laptop,
Right.
as though it was the TV set broadcasting live news. So then later in the day, I started watching clips that were edited by professional news people who said, here in 3 minutes, because YouTube is so nice, they'll tell you how long the clip is. Well, I don't want to look over more than 3 or 6 minutes. 6 minutes on what happened on the inside. 6 minutes on what happened wrong with the cops, the security guards. So, I'm still perplexed. We got that mow down the Kennedys. Why must we continue to mow down the Kennedys? That's like Mick Jagger saying, who killed Kennedy? Well, after all, it was you and me. Well, I didn't kill Kennedy, but in what way is he metaphorically and poetically saying that? And then to illustrate that the hot politics of Old Machine won't work on TV. That's what really perplexes me. The hotness. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Well, it's a provocative statement. And I think he is, just the rather callous way with which he addresses the horrible public assassinations of beloved heroes to many, is I think he's doing that on purpose to sort of get us to step back and look at the event without emotion and just sort of say, hey, we keep doing this sort of performative act. And, you could add Martin Luther King's assassination into this. He's not a Kennedy, but he's of that ilk. Some would say John Lennon, killing these sort of heroes that rise up, fighters, maybe. I don't know. I mean, those
Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, it's endless. Jimi Hendrix and Bob Marley, if you really want to get Dave McGowan on us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very hot way of dealing with things. And I think what McLuhan is coldly saying is that it is not going to play as well in the modern era. That's what I'm, it's just that they're using this old, it's an old machine, whack that guy, Prince Louis getting too big for his britches. You got to whack him, Clinton.
That's exactly it. Stop trying. If you try something and it doesn't work, and then you try it again and it doesn't work, the implication is that it is that killing Kennedy didn't work. Yeah. That killing Martin Luther King didn't work, right? Yeah. They're the impetus behind what was behind their initial rise continued on and was strengthened, right? So.
And the unintended outcome is you got a hero and you got a holiday. Now, except for in Arizona, that we have this holiday. Making a martyr is a dangerous proposition as well.
Yeah.
But did not work is interesting. If you go to the word conspiracy theory in Wikipedia and it says that might be a conspiracy theory that the CIA or the FBI or the government put those two words together to kookify political research. So it did not work, but it worked in that. Then they allowed Mark Lane or Oliver Stone or whoever to come along and say, well, we have some theories that maybe there wasn't one sole shooter on Kennedy. So then it will say, you live in the land of the free. You can do this kind of research and sell millions of books on this research, but we'll kookify it by saying it's conspiracy theories. So, when Vanity Fair said, well, that's just a form of literature criticism. So it's a very interesting, and I told Cameron that the great McLuhan New Sciences, and he thought, well, he didn't really delve into that idea that conspiracy theory is literature criticism. But who knows? I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but didn't that work? So I like what you guys said. It didn't work. It consolidated my generation. We felt we helped stop the Vietnam War with anti-war marches. And my deep researcher friends, that didn't stop the war, but maybe it consolidated us in like thinking.
Well, in this sense, the Kennedy assassinations are like Christ-like. You whack out the dude. Not to get biblical, but I mean certainly that mythos exists here. Stronger in death than what does Ben Kenobi say? If you strike me down, Doth, I'll become stronger in death than I am in life.
Yeah, exactly. Now, another interesting part is also there was like 4 or 5 national television broadcasters when Kennedy was assassinated, and your generation was consolidated, like ABC, NBC. Gerry, you didn't have that many channels to choose from in the first place, so the consolidation was a lot different than what's happening now, right?
That McLuhan is almost presaging the inevitable death of the young Kennedy who died in that plane crash under, some would say, dubious circumstances. I don't know. I never looked into that, but certainly the Paul Wellstone, we can talk about that plane going down. But yeah, I mean, it's McLuhan was presaging that, predicting it. The peasants don't respond to the acts of hot violence the same way they used to.
Who don't, Rob? Who don't?
I can see the elite sitting on the castle and saying, the peasants aren't responding to the beatings like they used to. The hot violence isn't working. We need to have, but the narrative violence is very captivating to them. The cool medium of television is very popular in a very effective way, like football, to communicate tribal beliefs.
Maybe we can formalize it by saying that the hot old way, the being made an example of for everyone to see, was a benefit of that form of assassination. And now, if you're going to assassinate someone now, that's too much. It's flipped into martyrdom, and everyone wants to do the whole "I am Spartacus" thing afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So now the assassinations have to look like accidents, and it's autoerotic asphyxiation. Sorry, and no one even knows it was an assassination anymore.
That's exactly it. And I think it has a lot to do with the evolving individuality of the population. Back in the day, we're going to kill Peasant 46 to show you guys that you can't rise up against us. And now, we make Peasant 46 a celebrity, start a religion about it, and and so on and so forth. It's that and also have the means through the internet and other means to distribute that narrative. Which relates to the next question: conflict as the human condition, the one that you got.
Oh, before we go into that, that was good though. I'm going to read that little part, but
you like that Gerry? I was,
Oh man, Rob, that was perfect lead in, because we could spend the whole hour on that one question, but you guys covered it so well. But in understanding media, when he says TV is cool, that there's more effort of the viewer to determine meaning. So, it's interesting. Why did my brothers, watch that? And I'm not demonizing him or saying he did wrong. I think everybody was captured. Everybody I've asked, did it increase? They said, yes, it increased. So, who are you? The increased police? Everybody it increased. And to determine meaning. And T.S. Eliot, to stay poetic, is saying, I had the experience, but missed the meaning. So we're seeking out, well, why did this happen? I went around, I was on the boardwalk saying, who raised these people? And this guy walking down the street had an amazing comment on the boardwalk, and I forgot what it was, but I says, is that your theory? How did you come up with that? And he goes, acid. Which was classic, because you guys brought up TV earlier, and McLuhan has the great comment that when my generation, baby boomers, went to college, we were no longer sitting in front of the TV set. So in order to get that psychedelic TV experience, we took acid. And every Friday night in my dorm, we would play Alice in Wonderland by Disney, and everybody would trip and get high. Every Friday night it was a ritual. So I mean, I was living in McLuhan without really reading him. And once Bob turned me on to him years later, I went back to my college notebooks and I thought, well, I must have been studying like Understanding Media or Medium's Massage. I started with the Mechanical Bride and art history classes, which was, do shopping, cover and all. But that was good because this whole thing of why do we have to have meaning? There's something about this idea. Who is America? What are we? The Capitol building. Is some of that us? Those guys, and they're all they all walk the carpet line once regular, like we're all in grocery stores walking our line perfectly, but there's chaos also. So, I mean, what is the meaning of that? And I would just go with this question, which I've asked the group. Rob, can you forgive these people?
Well, it's not my place, but to entertain the question, any crime can be forgiven, and well, almost any, I suppose. I held them in quite low regard. So it's not as though I'm forgiving. All right, we can be buddies again. I'll read your kooky posts.
No, that's fine. It's a hard question. Clinton, can you forgive these people?
They're not the only ones that I have. What they've done, I guess, is push things to a new level, set a new precedent. The fact that these guys broke into the Capitol building and then clearly didn't know what to do next, goofed around, left, and are now going to be probably thrown in prison, I'm sure. Just your country's been going through stuff for years now, doing crazy, ridiculous acts of protesting or rioting or destruction of property or whatever you want to call it. Everyone's got their own opinion depending on who it is and where it is and what's taking place and why it's happening and what it's for. I'm not going to single these guys out as needing my forgiveness. I forgive everyone. No, not just these guys. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's the exhausted death rattle of the American empire. As we are in the decadent phase of our imperial progress, in the seventh phase of empire, which is decadence. These are the people that we saw there in Washington were examples of the excess of information. The excess of access to information. The gluttonous pursuit of.
Have there been estimates as to how many total overall people came? I mean, well, it was probably a couple dozen people slam the barricades, 100, 200, 300 people, actually tried to raid the Capitol building out of millions of people standing around singing the national anthem.
And you look at the protest, the BLM protest. I mean, I know I've been to marches for abortion rights that were in the hundreds of thousands. My guesstimate was 50,000 when I looked at the numbers, and I looked at the camera angle. You don't know. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't this overwhelming thing. That's why it's so clownish that they broke in so easily.
Yeah, and there was a 6-minute reduced piece on YouTube that I watched, and they interviewed people who weren't the clowns, let's say, or the people who sieged. They were like, hey, we didn't come to do that. We were just doing normal, and we heard that they were doing that. And, so, there's a lot of depth there in it. Yeah.
Well,
we studied it so much. They found. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
To bring it back to the Kennedys, then we get to trot out America's favorite conspiracy theory. The lone gunman, the bad apple, the bad apple who, it's just, and then everyone, all members of society can extend their pointer finger and look at just, some rebels, some knuckleheads. It wasn't.
There's this thing that reporter Tim Pool likes to say when he was covering the revolutions in Egypt, and he said you got to realize that that it's a couple thousand, revolutions happen with the 1,000 people there who make it happen, and the whole rest of the country is going about his day perfectly normal, oblivious. You go 2 streets over and everyone's sitting outside drinking a cup of coffee and reading a newspaper, don't even know, right? Revolutions don't look like everyone standing up with one thing and all together. It's always just that they become the face of it. They're not, but it's always a tiny minority anyway, right?
And I had that exact experience. I walked outside of my apartment during the coverage. I lived right here in Venice, and got a coffee or something. And people were out there on the street who had they weren't tuned into it, didn't know what was going on, didn't care. Oh. And in that respect, coming back to the cold medium idea, it's happening on your computer. It's this little monitor where, by the way, you watch a lot of movies and a lot of TV, and it has this spectacle-like quality of and performative quality that does not come across as authentic, and that's why I kind of had that reaction a little bit. I mean, I know it was. I'm not saying it was faked or anything like that. It's just it's very performative. And
well, that's like 9/11 in Ireland. They scrolled the footage. And underneath the scroll was, "This is not a Hollywood movie." while they're showing the footage.
Exactly. Wow.
But I did want to go into that little New York Times thing that I sent. And Rob, I'm glad you pulled it up and you guys can read this. But before we go into it, is like the forgiveness thing. Again, I go back to Bob Dobbs, because through the Evergreens, the medium he's consulted over the years, they said the key to everything is forgiveness. And I always love Mark Twain, a great American, who said forgiveness is the smell the flower releases when the foot crushes it. And so, how do we forgive these people? And how do we forgive Trump? And how do we forgive anyone? Because there's so much involvement. Like, why did the cops stand out? All this stuff is McLuhan's causality. What caused this? And there's so many layers to it. Okay, these layers caused it. Now, what are we going to do about it? Increase, they showed them putting up the fences the next day. Well, why didn't you put up the fences the day before? I mean, it's
BLM.
Yeah, it's same. And then for Biden to come out and say this would have been different was an amazing thing. I thought that he would say that if these people were black. But this is the omnipresence. This is McLuhan saying the omnipresence of news has merged the inner and the outer states of it's the state of collective emotional consciousness. So what a statement. The omnipresence of news has merged the inner and the outer state of collective emotional consciousness. So then this gentleman who writes TV criticism for the New York Times, which I thought was very interesting, and he put this out in December of 2017, and his name's James Poniwasek, and it's really a simple thing. The cable news business model, which means the omnipresence of news, the news, just say the news model. Conflict means urgency, and urgency means viewers glued to the channel. He's a TV critic. He's not saying, well, there's good TV and bad TV. He's saying, I'm a cheerleader for TV. I know there's good and bad. So he is part of the TV mechanism. I also loved when Bob used to say, you're not going to see Dan Rather go on and go, tonight there's no news, turn your TV set off. Like today something happened at the Capitol, but what the heck, you don't want to know about it. It's on the other side of the country. It's just a bunch of clowns. Turn your TV sets off. So this idea of McLuhan saying fasting. So then it goes, conflict means urgency, and urgency means viewers glued to the channel. So right off the bat, before we go into the couple lines after that, Clinton, is conflict the human condition? And is there a human condition? Like people go, well, that's the human condition. You fall, you get up, or, whatever. People want to define the human condition. Is conflict the human condition? And is there a human condition?
If conflict, I instead use the word tension, then yes, tension is the human condition. Things work when there are pressures. Always it's like thermodynamics almost. The engine of there's always going to be tensions and pressures and walking a line and trying to keep in proportion and balance as things are shrinking and growing. If
so
that's conflict,
hold it.
that
Yeah,
can
hold
break
it.
into violence. So yeah.
Yeah, let's hold it right there. What you're saying, if I can interpret it and you tell me this right, is that tension is a way to say it was suspended judgment. Conflict implies negative. Tension just involves this. Okay, now you, Rob, is conflict the human condition, and is there a human condition?
I would firmly say no. I'm a believer in an empathetic civilization. As Clinton framed it, it makes perfect sense to say yes, tension, competition for resources, for mates, etc., is a natural part of the human condition. But as worded, conflict, I don't think is, and I think, okay, and we're talking degrees. Some conflict may come in, but I think especially modern conflict is driven largely by the interests of a micro elite or and not so much by the interests or needs of the masses who do the fighting and dying.
Like divide and conquer. It's
sure.
Like, yeah, because all the news is saying now we're going to have a civil war. Aren't you afraid? It's like, what are you guys doing? Effects precede causes? Are you setting it up? So then it seeks out arguments, pushes buttons. Go ahead.
Well, argument does push buttons, and I listen occasionally to sports podcasts, particularly basketball, NBA, which I'm a fan of. And it became a thing. I don't know quite when it did, but it became a thing somewhere in TV news where you would have two guys of different opinions and they would fight and attack each other. I think PTI and a few of these different shows. And of course, the news had been doing it for a while. The McLaughlin report, where you had these different opinions, and it's cheap and easy TV. It's when TV's hot, because instead of like, I'm going to say some thoughtful things and counter your points with logic, and you say some thoughtful things, and the audience has to sit there and think about it. I'm going to call you a jerk and why no one should vote for you because you're a damn socialist. And it's when TV's at its worst,
Yeah, that's a great example. That is Frank Zappa on Financial News Network, all in his shirt and tie, and it's really fiery, and he goes, hey, fuck you, or he really does he's being very logical and sane, but he does and most Zappa people just love it. They're like, isn't that cool what Frank did it? But Frank wrote the lyric many years before that, checking out the news till my eyeballs fail to see. That's in the song Every Day. I mean, that is really going back to the mowing down quote, checking out the news till my eyeballs fail to see. But yeah, I'm glad you did that, because I didn't bold that. So it seeks out arguments and pushes buttons. But this line gets me. It is a machine designed to generate stress and negative emotion. Meaning, but wait, Rob, here's the question to you and then Clinton. Isn't all human inventions designed to generate stress and negative emotion, and they're designed to generate empathy and good emotion? They're designed to do both, but we can't control what they really do.
I don't think many of them are designed to that. I mean, definitely the automobile was not designed to create stress. Driving LA in an automobile or driving long distance automobile is stressful. I just want to bring up Robert Townsend quote real quick and then pass to Clinton. He said, television is democracy at its ugliest.
Yeah, sure. That's a great one.
Yeah.
I, I, I feel like the whole 3-act story structure itself
Mm.
is sort of like, we're going to make you feel tense or feel conflict so that we can then make you happy with the catharsis at the end,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
It's
mhm.
it's like making someone sick so you can sell them the cure, so to speak. So in that regard, is television a machine designed to generate stress and negative emotion? Um, McLuhan said yes. The news has to be bad so that the commercials are the good part, and that's what advertisers want, right? The advertisers offer the catharsis from the stress position that the depressing TV news is putting you into.
That's
Um,
definitely true of the Super Bowl commercials.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, you have to sit through the Super Bowl to watch them. That's the annoying part. um, yeah. So, for instance, actually, I'm worried that the catharsis of a new presidential administration in America is going to close people's eyes or to much needed scrutiny on continuing political processes in the nitty gritty, which have been being observed obsessively for the last 4 years. That everyone's going to go, oh, we can go back to normal and stop paying attention to news again now, finally, right? People are going to let their guard down, and then that's when shenanigans happen from any political side, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because building, it goes on. The New York Times article is really good because it's the fight or flight response, savored and cultivated, pump himself up for battle,
Yeah.
anger juices, and tweeting, sending out more waves of hostility. The feedback cycle results in news everywhere, and all of us end up trapped in the mindset of an angry news junkie, even if we're not watching. It's like secondhand smoke.
Well,
So it was just so dominant.
I mean, that's the whole 3-act structure is also similar to a roller coaster ride. You have the loading of the car, which is the introducing the characters, and you have that slowly thing, and then you have this big climax. I mean, that form has existed. I'm sure going back to burlesque and other sort of troubadours, if you will. But it is codified now. It is codified, and to some extent the monomyth that Campbell talked about as well. Jump off on that, Clinton.
Yeah, yes. The hero's journey is the spiritual, right? It's because it's so mediated. The 3-act structure and the hero's journey is the background religion for secular American culture.
Whoa, you're right. Yes, yes. Oh, that's great. That is really good because it is this story, expressed most acutely, I think, in fantasy sci-fi that has messianic protagonists like Star Wars, Terminator, and these others, where here's the protagonist. He comes from a broken home. He was stripped from his parents. He was like Moses, put in a river and sent down and raised as a peasant, and he rises up. Maybe that's the story of the Kennedys. I mean, they were bootleggers. They were no peasants, but and working with the Canadians very effectively, I might add. But yeah, it's that sort of universal myth of you can do it. And I remember because I identified very closely with those characters coming from a quote unquote broken home, if you will. And so many Americans were in the 60s and 70s, and that kind of narrative became your pull yourself up from your bootstraps and hardcore American narrative. And that you're special. It's also American exceptionalism. You're special. Luke has a power that, we just can't see. He just looks like a California punk, but he's actually, going to bring balance to the universe through horrible acting and rehashed plots.
Rob, to take it to the present January 6th is the building. If you go to CBS Sunday Morning, there's a 6-minute piece on the history of the building, the Capitol building.
Oh yeah.
And they're all stages. It's stages. There's 3 or 4 stages.
Yeah.
So you can even go back. You went back to cabaret or vaudeville or wherever you went back to. It goes back to Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
All the world is a stage. And
Yeah.
then, in the proscenium arch. But then you got Marshall flipping mid-career from Global Village to Global Theater. So then we're all actors on the Global Theater. So this was just this big, as you said, 3-act stage play.
Yeah, and the steps mimic the steps of the pyramid, and the proscenium and the whole bit there. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, the 3-act story structure is replicated in basic Roman and Greek architecture, because you have the base, the column, and the capital. And all buildings had, you had how you finished it, you had the extension, and how you did it on the top, and that was a very basic repeated form. I mean, I think I think it really works. Obviously, it wouldn't have propagated if it didn't work. But the question becomes, is it outdated or not? I mean, that's not the right word. Is it time for a new form? Are we captive to the form that we've become accustomed to?
Well, what just having a parliament where it's 2 sides facing each other across an aisle. We have that. That's what the House of Parliament looks like in Canada, but and did in Britain when Winston Churchill said, "First we shape our rooms, and then thereafter our rooms shape us." The whole idea of having an opposition is literally the opposing side that you're across the aisle from, right? I don't think the American Senate is quite set up that way.
It's a fan.
Yeah, right.
There is a center aisle, but of course, I don't know if they have. Because the numbers vary, so sometimes one side has a majority. So I don't know. Do you get to take some of the other guys' seats? Is it sort of like risk? You colonize their country?
Yeah. Yes. If you got a really big party, then you've taken over half the other benches as well. Yeah, exactly.
Are there viable third and fourth party in Canada? Fourth parties?
Yes. Yes. Well, there's the more frequent than not, though. A minority government can be right. The third party sort of counts as being able to have power in a minority government. So if there's 100 seats and the ruling party has 45 of them, then the other 2 parties can gang up to vote them to, can have a coalition and form the government, or they can just let the minority party, need them to, vote on, get the approval of some of them, and that tempers, right? When we have minority governments very often. So it's
interesting.
It's a big change in political season as to whether there's a majority government or a minority government, right?
What are the different proclivities of them?
Conservative. There's the Conservative Party, the Liberals, and the NDP, which are more left. They're like got more origins in socialism. NDP is usually the smallest. Then there's the Green Party, of course. They always have a couple candidates, but
is there a party to the right of the Conservatives?
Yes, it's very new. It's
of course
People's Party of Canada, and they tend to get unfairly maligned as extremists, but of course they do end up soaking up, the long tail of everyone who's disaffected from politics, including lots of extremists, right? But it's very free trade, protect the borders sort of deal stuff that would jive with a Trump supporter, the People's Party of Canada. But I don't think they managed to get. They've been trying. They almost got a seat or 2, but there's no room in Canada for that sort of thing right now. Well, at least based on the popular perception of those ideas.
Good.
Well, one thing, Rob, you brought up was, the tetrad being 4, that we're always seeking a 5th in characters. We're on this thing, the stage and the characters. And I just wanted to interject that McLuhan said the Finnegan's Wake characters are the media themselves. That these people who appear as characters in this narrative are the media themselves. And I was wondering if you guys could talk about this, staying on this line about the building is a stage, all the world is a stage. We're in this global theater. And Marshall's just saying, here's the code book, I broke the code of Finnegan's Wake, and the characters are the media. So how did the media become the characters? Because it's sort of like back to the conflict of the dichotomies of eye versus ear, hot versus cool, matching or making, and more so invention and suspended judgment. So if we say, well, they invented TV to brainwash us, the great through line is, the MK Ultra studied Finnegan's Wake so we could learn how to brainwash people. And that's sounds so kooky, but it's like, if you go that dichotomy is invention and suspended judgment. So I would love to hear you guys in Figure Ground. I'd love to hear you guys discuss this idea, just to flush out that the Capitol building is a stage. McLuhan saying that the characters in Finnegan's Wake are the media themselves. Like, are these characters the media themselves in this event that happened? Who are the characters, in this event? The media, or so many people say, oh, they're clowns, but 5 people were killed. Well, and there's something deeper there that I'm trying to understand with McLuhan saying characters are the media themselves.
I got something, unless Clinton's wants to go first.
Go ahead, Rob.
No, please go ahead, Robbie.
Especially with the most visually interesting characters, they're easily recognizable, and they're easily memeable. There's already hundreds of memes of these anarchists as Lego characters. Someone posted something, this is what happens when you don't have Burning Man.
Oh, really? That's
all these hilarious memes, and they were out that night. And so I guess the way I take that is that the individual characters that rise become. Look at Roger Stone. He's a character going back to Nixon, right? And famously has a Nixon tattoo on his back, and is also polyamorous. I want to talk about a weirdo. And now because of that character he created of being very loyal to Nixon to the end, he was able to perpetuate forward into this modern era from the media figure that he had created, the perception of who he was.
Wow. That was good, Rob. Yeah. And any thoughts on the me? It's
oh, you broke up for a second there, Gerry.
Where he says, Marshall says in Mechanical Bride that science fiction is a character. He says these comic books are characters. In his science. No, he says these mediums are characters in my new science fiction novel, The Mechanical Bride.
Yeah, media as characters. I think a large part of McLuhan's thesis, especially with The Mechanical Bride and earlier stuff, is that we don't just have mimesis in communicating with other people and role models, right? There's all the language of social construction theory today is sort of premised on people being socialized, getting ideas from their parents, getting affected by their friends, their community, the people on TV. It's people affecting people, people affecting people. And I've always seen McLuhan as going, it's the total environment affecting people. It's the very fact that your senses are putting the whole world together every moment. We get mimetics from machines, right? Machines influence us like people. You wouldn't have had industrial music come out of any city other than Detroit, factory town.
Absolutely. Rock and roll was just bluegrass in the urban environment,
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure that the parents who are freaking out that manic cartoon television characters with shows with jump cuts that happen every half second gave their kid an attention deficit. Those parents will probably be vindicated in the end when everyone's looking at because the media itself mimetically pressed itself into our beings. Just our use of it changes us as people through our plasticity in a way that's just as strong as we are socialized, yes, by our role models and our heroes and our parents and whatnot.
And definitely the conflict that we see in so much of our dramas and our television. I mean, in a movie and a TV show, the most dramatic thing can happen is a death, and often it's a murder. And most of us never witnessed a death, and certainly not a murder. Very rare, but you witness half a dozen a night on television.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was interesting because ours was the Kennedy assassination. Yours might have been the 9/11 Clinton. I mean, I guess, Rob, your Kennedy assassination. Now for like Jay's kids. Okay. Well, what would be yours? Was 9/11 yours?
9/11 for sure was probably, yeah. I would think the most defining. The hostage crisis was kind of a thing, but
right. 11. And then for Jay's kids, 8 and 10 years old, will this be it? And if it is, it's like, that's like, back to this character thing. I'm just wondering these dichotomies of the eye being cool and detached, neutral, the ear being super hypersensitive and all inclusive. Here's the two McLuhan statements I'd love to hear your takes on. Merely, these characters are, the media are characters merely involved in action, but not detached from the action. This idea of detachment, and it uses all of you, but leaves you detached in the act of using you. So it sounds redundant, but I'm trying to suss out what Marshall meant by this. It uses all of you, but leaves you detached in the act of using you. You're merely involved in the action, but not detached from the action. Go ahead.
I didn't. What is it in the question? It leaves you.
Well, in his case, he was saying jazz music, it uses all of you. So he was saying that in one character, but it is any sort of, like, let's just say an event, the January 6th event uses all of you, but leaves you detached in the act of using you. So it's sort of like the medium, Marshall was saying, of jazz music, the medium of a political event. These characters as media, they're involved in the action, but are detached from the action. It sounds, it doesn't.
Your brother and his wife sitting on their couch eating Cheetos, glued to the television, really unable to affect what they're seeing in any way, being disgusted by it. It riles you up. It worked you up. And was that a good night of sleep that they had? Probably not. And you got up in the morning and turned it on again.
Yeah.
And, I myself walked away from it. I turned it off. I chose instead to watch a superhero movie. I thought it was a more honest portrayal of American politics.
That's a true McLuhanite saying, I'm media fasting right now. But
I did after a while, and I said, I'll just wait to the analysis. And just as Clinton said earlier, I find in this age, if you find a few trusted and intelligent writers and media that rather than you spending the time to read just the news stories and sort of forming an opinion. You go to these individuals and they are information aggregators. I think that's very important in this day and age because you don't have time.
Now,
And-
I don't.
Go ahead.
Yes, that's true. And yet also I don't trust institutionalized traditional corporate aggregators whatsoever. Or right, I'm not going to go with the groupthink on Reddit, or I don't watch, late night comedy fake news shows like Colbert Report.
Colbert, yeah.
Or now I guess it's John Oliver, Trevor Noah. That's exactly not the sort of aggregation which is in any way constructive whatsoever. I think that's exactly this the precursor of the spectacle that has been going on for the entire catharsis after Bush was finally gone. America had 8 years of cathartic relief of having finally gotten rid of the dumbest American president ever, right? American idiot, ha ha ha, right? Oh my God, Bush is gone. We got Obama. This is great. We got great late night television comedians as the primary news aggregators for people who don't actually watch news or read newspapers or pay attention. Yeah, and then now these guys have been the center of resistance under the Trump administration for the past 4 years, but I don't think it's been an honest. I don't think their own role as total spectacle has been proportionately understood when compared to the size of, say, a Trump rally. A Trump rally looks scary, but 1 million Americans sitting around every night in their most suggestible state right before sleep while watching, an hour of political propaganda for 8 years is also quite a rally of a political sort of equal proportion that's been going on far longer, right? So
yeah, because I've always said that the fake news of whoever, Jon Stewart and then the whole slew you just mentioned, were pacifying people and not activating them. But indeed, you go back to Martin Luther and he said satire will kill the devil. So satire's been around forever. And, my friend who wrote for comedy, Robin Williams, I said, can satire be destructive? And he says, that's the job of satire. Yeah. So I'm pulled because people think there's no good investigative journalism anymore. And I go, there is. There's people, and they're more willing to get killed than before, maybe. So there's a push and pull there because there are services to political satire. Paul Krasner was great at it, but then I think there's disservices to it. So that was a good conundrum you brought up. Go ahead, Rob. What were you going to say?
No, there's always good information out there. You just have to know where to look for it. And this is, what McLuhan said about the electronic age returning us to tribal form, to tribal man. We all are getting our information from different sources. We're all, not all, but many are living within a echo chamber of ideas, and where tribal beliefs, however abstract and non-factually based, become agreed upon, and that is continuing to happen over on the right. Believe me, I get some updates from QAnon, from my QAnon friend, and they're fully convinced. Oh, just you hold on, it's coming up. There's this great unveiling. Sometimes it's called the storm, and it's just this idea, which also, by the way, ties into the biblical stuff, and it's a age-old form of PR stunt. Which is, some just you wait, some thing is just about to happen. It just needs a little more time. They can't hold that on forever. I mean, I don't know how all this story is going to end, but I have to say I'm compelled to watch it, as we all are. The political goings on. When has ever the machinations of democracy, the actual wheels turning, ever been monitored? I mean, none of us had ever heard of these events where the Electoral College and then and Trump made them national holidays. I mean, it's interesting. Will the 6th be commemorated, and how, and should it be? Because does commemorating it give them power? Does naming this event and its operatives, its media characters, give them power? Does it become a day of democracy? How about a day of civic instruction on the 6th?
Nice. Yeah, that's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's an ancient proverb. And then it got morphed into frenemies the year I was born, 53. But let's start with Clinton. Here's a simple question. Can we unweave the spell of news with news? Whether it's satire news or investigative journalism?
Yes, yes. I think news is just too basic a thing. It's a rather fundamental element. So there's nothing to appeal to fight news with than more news, unless you just want to be nihilistic and live under a rock or something. If you're going to pay attention to news, the thing is, there are facts that can get that, and then when the facts are selected for specifically so as to fit a narrative, that it becomes a lie of omission in the eyes of people who have a different interpretation. And that's what is wrong with all the news is there's not. It's kind of funny. They don't have enough news to fill the 24-hour news schedule. They cause drama to make it happen on a slow news day, and yet also any one event is so exhaustive, and you can dive into endlessly for forever. Like, this event is going to be poured over forensically, like the Kennedy assassination was, right? This single moment in time, right? This is a Zapruder film, the most watched film of all time, right? Right. So any one event is worthy of an entire investigative report of great exhaustive import, but you never get that in the way we consume news today, except in vast retrospect anyway.
Well put. In Robbie, what do you think? Can we unweave the spell of news with news?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. The only way to turn off Trump is to not put a camera on him. His whole intention this post-election period was to make himself the story. That's the mastery of him. He is the mule. He is the genius of media manipulation, and he understands how to do that. And the moment that they just don't show up and put a camera in his face, and Twitter turning him off was huge. Thank you. Although that's going to lead to some very interesting First Amendment rights. I mean, the right is using a lot of First Amendment and civil rights arguments to really maintain the viability of their hate speech and of people like Donald Trump. There's going to be a conservative version of everything. We are truly going to have two worlds. There's a conservative movie studio that's being formed. You already have Parler, which is the conservative Facebook, if you will, or, and so on and so forth. It'll just be like, there'll be conservative grocery stores, conservative laundromats. We don't use those kind of those detergents in here.
And Rob, you nailed it, because Marshall said in Take Today, the word makes the market. 5 words that explain Trump. And that's why Steve Bannon said a few years ago, Trump's the most McLuhan-esque president.
Oh, wow.
But let's go into this film criticism for a second, because I think that these people really touched on we have this background in film criticism. This article in the New York Times on Jean Renoir's amazing film called The Rules of the Game, 1939, the year Finnegan's Wake came out. And this is an article that quotes the film theorist Andre Bazin, wrote that by the time of Rules of the Game, Jean Renoir, the director, had uncovered the secret of a film form that would permit everything to be said without chopping the world up into little fragments, that would reveal the hidden meanings in people and things without disturbing the unity natural to them. So to me, it was just like, he's revealing the hidden psychic effects by not chopping it up into little fragments, by doing these long takes and letting this play out, and just really anticipating another great important film of 39, The Wizard of Oz, or The Wizard of Us, pay no attention to the man behind the screen. You know, the emperor's not wearing any clothes. He might be wearing a bulletproof vest. But this whole idea of fragmentation, what do you think, Clinton? You know, we need the big picture. Like, you know, this article really, the cut line is exploring how society bends the rules without actually breaking them. So we live linearly in this big picture, but we learn it through fragmentation. So, you know, go ahead. What do you think, Clinton? Any ideas?
Jane Austen was the last English novelist who McLuhan saw as being able to write characters and situations and capture the essences of the characters and the little human scale dramas with the fullness and the unity that is not fractured up, as he was just saying there about Barzun in film. This is just something to do with the way education changed in England over the course of all this stuff. This is from his old English class lectures and notes I was reading through at the archives here in Ottawa. The internet, growing up on the internet, is a medium where you can zoom in on a person's life. You know, you can see all their posts and what they've thought for you know, been going on for years. You can see them in the element of their whatever website they're using, what their flair is on Reddit, say, or whatever badges they've got on some web forum. They're abstract cyberspace places where human beings in all their fullness are talking and sharing themselves, and that's an element of the internet that news media and traditional journalism at large still hasn't failed. They still act like anthropologists exploring some strange weird tribe and customs. Like, we went to this web forum and it's full of all these weirdos who talk like this and they're all called like this, right? And then the public at large get these stereotypical images in their head of, oh, that guy's just an incel or something, right? These like archetypal sort of romanticized portrayals of what regular people just sitting around talking amongst each other, whatever their gripes are, end up, you know, becoming caricatured stereotypes. And so, I mean, that's true for you know, all the women with their or men too, with, you know, with their OnlyFans pages now. Like who is it you want to creep on the internet and learn about? You're gonna have all these categories, and people will willingly accept the labels that are thrust onto them by society, right? And these are fractured labels. These are fractured archetypal manufactured identities and roles. Oh, is that what I am? You're calling me this. You're calling me this. I guess I am that. And they just put on how they're described, or they resist and do something different. But the internet's full of real human people, and what the detachment of the medium does is it creates this fractured view of other people when we try to take shortcuts. So that's just immediately what came to mind. The director, Barzun, you said?
No, Andre Bazin, Bazin, is a film theorist.
Bazin.
It's Jean Renoir made the film, but Robbie,
okay.
Yeah, and Robbie, I wanted to thank you because on the links on this video, we link to your handout for your students called Media and Society. And indeed, it's an amazing consolidation of a lot of fragments, but it gives you a big picture view. So could you talk about this fragments versus, you know, the big picture view?
Well, that's a very interesting issue, and it comes down to the issue of education. How do you prepare your citizenry for the world? Are you going to teach them the microverse or the macroverse, or in what order? I mean, ultimately, you're teaching both. Well, here's how you screw in. You know, here's how you use a drill and a screw. I mean, that's a micro thing. But then the larger concept of building a house and what that takes is much more macro, and you have to teach that as well. And I think. I feel like we could do a better job of teaching people the ways and the patterns of life and how they're interstitched together, and less of a job and less information and micro information about how to do things. In other words, teach them how to think, give them skills, give them skills for thinking, especially early, and not focus so much on factoids and remembering things and all that. And the internet makes that all the more true, doesn't it? Because now none of us have to have this stuff at our fingertips. Now, I'm not completely displacing that value. Memory has a great function. I remember in one of our sessions, I think it was Robin that was talking about how having a good memory, in conversation allows you to bring up things and pull different stuff in. But having said that, I think building a human that understands better and has a macro understanding rather than a fractionalized, fragmented micro understanding is better. And part of that is a product of our specialization. People specialize now. They never used to. The American male could fix the car. He could plant the food. He could carve the turkey. And now you have most millennials do not know the dangerous end of a hammer or how to fix their car, but they know they can win video games, and they know how to write code, and they're in that world.
They know how to go on YouTube and pull up a video that says how to fix your car.
This is how I'd say the skills now move to being entirely interpersonal, and this is where social constructionist theory and where postmodernism sort of has its day as useful explanatory models of contemporary human behavior. Once you don't know how to fix your car anymore, once everyone looks at the Tim the Tool Man Taylor as a total klutz and do it yourself as a dangerous project, and ends up needing to hire and pay experts and then evaluate and trust. Do you know a good mechanic is, right? Do you know a good electrician? All these it all comes down to the people skills and the advertising and the brand making and the social construction of your world. Is who do I give money to? What expert do I give money to today to fix this one fractured part of my life? What money do I give the next to,
And very often we turn to aggregators. That's what Yelp is. It's an aggregator of, a lot of people gave this thing 4 stars. The thing is, this can be easily gamed, as we've learned with Yelp, Yelp reviews. The manager just has his sister write him a good review.
Oh yeah, make anything a system, it can be gamed. My dad always used to say, and my dad's the guy who fixes his own car and builds his own extension on the house and puts the drywall up. He's a well handyman guy. So I'm very much on the outside of socially constructed culture or that sort of thing. But what I do see is that my dad would often say, call a place paradise and you can kiss it goodbye, implying that as soon as everyone knows this aggregator is trusty and worth listening to, they're going to sell out or get gamed or get somehow, and they're going to lose reliability. Frank Zappa, you're only in it for the money, right? The idea of people selling out is just So the internet is always a changing landscape, because if you find an aggregator, you almost don't want them to get popular. It's like your little secret. They give you the best, better arguments than everyone else is getting.
Interesting. Don't. And this is a function of our enormous population. Things get ruined. I live in Los Angeles, Clinton, and if a party or an event or a social thing that was regular once a month once it catches on, now you have literally 20 million people within an hour's radius of the event, and it gets flooded, and then it becomes something else. And of course, the promoters that's the idea, is to expose your ideas to people. So they grow with it. They change. Burning Man is a perfect example. It's now grown beyond. And it what you said really makes me think is within every success is obsolescence built in, or at minimum transformation, but often you flip into what you weren't trying to be. You know,
Yeah,
Exactly.
obsolescence means abundance or ubiquity, so much so that it's not interesting anymore in McLuhan terms. So
Mhm.
books are obsolete because everyone has a million of them, and we don't even care anymore,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? They don't figure, they don't pop out of the ground. They're not salient anymore, right? I'm sure in the 70s having a VCR was totally awesome. No one cares. No one notices the VCR. Hell, they probably do because it's so old. It's probably going to make a comeback, right? You still have a VCR? Right? Well, something like this. So yeah,
No,
absolutely.
I dumpster dive
Ubiquity.
I dumpster dive. Yeah,
Obsolescence
happens
with success. Yeah, exactly.
because I dumpster dive VHS cassette for their covers. They're so cool. Amos and Andy and Freddie King. These covers are cool. You know, the tape I don't need, but the cover. But you guys brought up so much there. It was like evoked a few great lines. Paul Schrader said the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. You know, so that romanticizes, you know, oh, this is so cool. But just to summarize, sort of getting towards the end here, and I'm glad we did this, and I hope it will continue as all our discussions do, is you brought up earlier, Clinton, this discussion of conflict, and it could be tension instead of saying conflict. In this article on Rules of the Game ends with that. It says the tension in Rules of the Game between the rich and the poor, between order and pandemonium, are so refined as to be almost self-generated or exclusive. And so this idea is you know, back to how do we bend the rules without actually breaking them. And you know, this is the bottom line question is always, well, what do we do about this? You know, and so, you know, we'll go to you, Rob, first. We know what happened on January 6th. What do we do about this?
Wow, why do you always got to start with the tough questions?
No, we're ending.
What do we do about this? Goodness gracious. Well, I'll tell you what we're most likely to do: continue to watch it as a spectacle on our televisions,
Yeah.
and probably do very little that's concrete.
Yeah.
You know, that's first off. If you want the real answer, fantasy that the will of the people actually makes a difference in our halls of power. Okay, so what would we do if we could, you know? You know, I want to say education, but I really do think that this particular population, I mean, I would wonder what McLuhan would say about this, is that, you know, you've created a Frankenstein monster. The Republican Party in particular has created a Frankenstein monster of this population that is detached from reality and fully convinced of alternative events and easily swayed by cryptic drops from this anonymous character called Q, and just really into a horrific magical thinking and almost you know, very, very similar to biblical thinking and very the type of logical leaps we see from people that believe in, you know, staunch religions. It's, you know, I think history has shown us that you can pretty much, your choices are cope with them or slaughter them. I mean, to be brutally honest, it's like, I don't know that you're going, I mean, I think you beat them down or try to re-educate them, it only makes them all the more, you know, as my father once says, one's duty in life is to keep the faith amongst the infidels. Well, who's the infidels? You know, in their mind, we're the infidels. And, you know, I did want to make this one comment. I noticed this trend amongst, you know, large scale, crappy Hollywood films, and including two I'll mention, Avengers Civil War, and another one, a James Bond. It might have been Skyfall. I can't remember the one, but and then there was a few of these, but the central plot point was that the enemy had infiltrated Central Command. That Hydra and the Avengers had infiltrated, and some some of the heroes were fighting for this side, and some of them were fighting for. I know there were several films. There's a third one. It's not coming to mind, but it was interesting how this idea was being propagated throughout the population, and this idea that a force, an alien force, had infiltrated and was actually running things, and you just weren't sure who you could trust. And I think that is very interesting, and it certainly describes how people feel today. But the heroes and the villains are flipped from different perspectives.
Yeah, Rob, that was really good, because I want Clinton to answer, what do we do about this? And I want you both to sum up any other comments like you did there. That was really good, because it reminds me, I went to this film festival in Northern California once, and this woman gave a lecture about how you're not going to change people's minds with political activist documentaries. And I'm a big fan of theirs, and I've studied them, and I think they're all important, from Frederick Wiseman to Michael Moore and everything in between. There's lots of them, and they teach me a lot. And I know there's some of them are agenda and some of them are not. She goes, you're going to teach people, you're going to change people with Titanic, because that's the massive parable, moral, Joseph Campbell, big spectacle story. Now, I don't think one or the other is more effective. They can both be effective, because we know that about Battle of Algiers. But I thought what you just said was good, Rob, because it put it in what I want to do with this series in layperson's terms. They're going to watch a spectacle Hollywood film, and here's an interpretation. And you being in the education world, you truly educated me there. That was a really good statement. So thank you. And again, you got time to do a closing sum up of any other point.
And let him answer. I want to see him answer that difficult question.
Yeah, I wanted Clinton. What do we do about this, Clinton?
Well, given your choice, I would hope for Cope over Slaughter every day of the week. Obviously, I'm sure. For crying out loud. It's poignant because it's historically heavy. It's the spectacle. All of postmodern electric television, socially constructed reality, where people don't know what their world is made of anymore, and they just have to trust the right experts to do everything for them, has been the conditions of, I don't know, I guess people call it late capitalism for decades now. So when we're going to talk about QAnon diehards living in a fantasy world, waiting for drops from beyond, it's sort of that itself is just a recapitulation of basically how the mainstream media stream, in my interpretation, meaning like this, like the wind or the breath of the zeitgeist of the age. The mainstream media is very much a sort of mystical post-acid trip, consensually constructed or manufactured illusion of Baudrillardian simulation, and has been. And that's largely, I think, what the right is reacting against when they make points like, why don't we get better voter ID laws so that I actually trust that this election was real? Why do we have, crappy internet connected voting machines running Windows being staffed by being run by more, like, I'm saying this because as an internet guy and as a computer guy, I've fought hard in Canada to spread awareness that we do not want voting machines in Canada for years now. We do paper ballots for our national elections, and Elections Canada Twitter account bragged about it a few weeks ago or a month ago to reassure Canadians that our elections are trustworthy. That's just one small facet, right? So when it comes down to socially constructed, postmodern, mainstream media calling conspiracy theorists who think they know what was really going on with the Kennedy assassination, who think they they really know who sunk the Lusitania or whatever, people who think they're lifting up the mask or drawing back the curtain and seeing the man behind the curtain, like that's the cult that you're dealing with. on the right is they think they're getting closer to reality than has been the mainstream all along. So yeah, they're making it up as they go along. They're creating their own reality, but it's in a it's in a counterthetical direction to what contemporary mainstream late capitalist decadent society in all of its illusions and Disneylandification has been describing itself as for a very long time. What do we do about that? We listen to the guys who are criticizing postmodernism while accepting that they don't even understand what it is they're criticizing, I think.
Who are they? Who are they, Clinton?
Oh, there's plenty of those guys out there. All the radical people who are complaining about runaway critical theory and whatnot. I think they need a much more of a seat at the table. They tend to get booted out of academia, it seems. There's trends of
Are you a fan of Jordan Peterson? Is this type person?
Exactly. I am. Yeah, because I mean, if you paid attention, why do we have to keep canceling Jordan Peterson to learn that the cool mediums of the cool effects aren't working on the new hot medium, right?
Sure.
Good rewording. That's what these aphorisms are all about. Reword them. And what about Zizek and Bob Dobbs and Jaron Lanier? I mean, all these guys. How about Doug Rushkoff? All of these?
It spans the spectrum, but yeah, people who see that, who are trying to, again, it gets down to the hero's journey, doesn't it? It ends up being a mess. I have to restore reality again, and in the era of confusion, that's a messianic fucking excuse me, my language. Idea to think you can swim to the source of truth and rekindle it and spread a spirit, right, to fight the mainstream of the evil capitalist zeitgeist, whatever. Yeah.
And that a single person can, rise to the top, that they're uniquely crafted, maybe even divinely anointed to rise to the top and shift the structure. It's a great lie and it's a great lie. In this way, the hero's journey the disservice is that, yes, you as the individual take the journey, when in actuality, as we saw on Wednesday, it's a collective, and you're on the ship with a bunch of clowns and a bunch of heroes and a bunch of geniuses and a bunch of idiots. So, I mean, how are you going to row forward together or not? And this idea that one person can shift it all is silly. It's really silly.
Now, that's not, however, to say that every person ought to individuate themselves from their tribe and find out who they are and stop drinking the groupthink Kool-Aid every once in a while. Being an individual is important. You don't need to be the individual who saves the world. That's right. But you have to at least be an individual. You have to have self-awareness. I think being an individual means having an accurate suspicion of what other people think of you and talk about you behind your back when you're not there. Right? People who lack self-awareness don't know how other people are seeing them when they leave the room. Right?
And the hero's journey that you have to go on is one of discovery. And unfortunately, I think this is a real problem, is we have societies which are constructed to confound to people and sell them things. So first of all, you have to deprogram your male bullshit. And then you have to deprogram your white Western trip. And then you can get around and you deprogram materialism, deprogram the quest for success and celebrity. And then you can get around to maybe who you are and what you want, but you get all these imprints that get put on you, and it's unfortunate. I mean, this is a product of our media-based society. We have so many images telling us how to be and who to be, and examples of better lives than the ones we're leading. And how do we negotiate that and find our own voice and our own path? And some people do it through media fast, and others, I guess, find their tribe on media and resonate with them. As one offer of what we do is, what if we had a couple decades where the government, taxed the corporations and the wealthy a little bit higher and did some programs and raised up. A lot of this frustration is about a loss of standing and a loss of purely wealth. And the generations that are being born now aren't doing as well as their parents. I'm not doing currently as well by certain measures as my father, right? That's not unusual. I don't know if that resonates with you or Clinton or not, but what if we just And you can't just give money away. I know that doesn't always have the most positive results, but something, maybe UBI. Maybe it's UBI is something we got to look at. We got to raise people up a little bit. And I think with a little more ease in their life, maybe they won't be so upset. I don't know. That wasn't much of an answer.
No,
Rob, that was really good, but it was good because it brought up the many layers, but it instigated in me. Are you saying you're happier than your dad because you have less? Or are you saying you should have done better according to yours and his standards? I didn't quite get that.
I was deeply happier with my father. He's quite a miserable person, but I'm saying he amassed more material wealth. He had more assets. He finished with more toys, if you will. So he went, arguably.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it explained. Post-war, America is the only place that has factories that aren't half bombed to the ground anyway, right? So it's all these historically contingent things that are that explain this, and yet at the end of the day, people just know, like you said, what life was like for their parents. Now what their life is like. It's I don't have much more to say beyond that.
Yeah. Well, you could also say that the Americans are a bit spoiled, and that's certainly true as well. And some of our spoiled attitude has come on the backs of other people who make products for us cheaply and ship it to us cheaply and all that, and on and on and on. I mean, I personally don't know that a solution will be arrived. I'm actually quite cynical and think that the system will have to break down further before any fixing can go on. America is typically reactive, not proactive. In other words, they don't put up a street sign until at least 2 teenagers are killed. Then, oh yeah, maybe we should put a stop sign here at this dangerous intersection. So I think that further deterioration will be needed for any action to take place.
And Rob, I think we boomers sort of adapted, and I don't like to categorize people. You're a millennial, you're a boomer, but I think boomers really gravitated toward Eastern philosophy. And that's why we get McLuhan, because he says, have suspended judgment. Don't say this is good or bad to everybody. When you're talking with other people, try to suss it out. And this is what I learned from Zappa, is embrace contradiction. That's why I say I'm a hypocrite. You got to love the cops as they beat the shit out of you. Nothing is what I want. These are amazing statements that Frank said. I'm not black, but there's a whole lot of times to say I'm not proud I'm white. That's Black Lives Matter. But it is, I think, beautiful that we did embrace this sort of, we don't need to own a home and have material as much as our parents did. And it sort of goes to this joke that I heard. The son goes up to his dad and says, now, Dad, are you absolutely sure you won't support me for the rest of my life? Now we laugh. Parents who have kids now, they go, that's not funny, because they're living it. But again, that's a generalization. And, behind every joke, there's a grievance. So I just wanted to say that what Clinton was talking about really got me in your restore reality. That's like one of the members of our Finnegan's Wake reading club said, Finnegan's Wake is the truth embodied. And it is, how do we live the metaphor? Marshall says we have to invent new metaphors. That's part of what do we do about this? Invent new questions and new metaphors, because we're not necessarily going to say, here's the answer, here's what we can do about it, because he even said this, which I would love to read one line that really got me. Prayer being one of the most extreme forces of violence, since it is conducted by supernatural force. That's like, it's your ass goodbye. Like, Marshall, they said, are you an optimist or a pessimist? He says, I'm an apocalypse. We're fucked. Now he didn't literally say that, but he knew that apocalypse means pull the curtain back and reveal the workings, reveal the hidden psychic effects, and it may be able to allow you to cope. Go ahead, Rob.
I think we also have to recognize that a full understanding of the workings of the complexities we're discussing is not capable by any single person.
Right.
And that society, stumbles along, and humans, despite all their faults, stumble along. And there could be periods of Great Depression or even death, and those are very unfortunate. But we come to our senses and we move forward. And even our great wars are great advances in technology for us. Go ahead.
Yeah. We may have fetishized the debate form of performing arguments to win over the crowd or the audience, and given us a perverse idea of what a discussion between two people who disagree is supposed to look like.
Yep. Movies like 12 Angry Men, and this sort of idea that Lilies in the Field, all that sort of activist cinema of the mid to late 50s into the 60s, which was like, we just tell them a heart-wrenching story that has a moral, we can convince the population,
Yeah. Well, is that not the very spectacle today of every popular social active cause? I mean, I had an aphorism I thought of the other day, and that would be that the road to hell is bushwhacked by expediency. If you want people, right? So, and that's very much the Dale Carnegie way of, you can get popular fast. Do it this way, right? The expediency of getting things done. Hey, let's start a movement. Let's do this, right? I mean, it's all too easy, but it's short-sighted, and it tends to be our enemies who see ahead how we're gonna, it seems like the most winning political move, I'll put it this way, is to give your enemy rope nowadays, because everyone's so incompetent. You just give the other guy rope because you already anticipate how he's gonna screw it up, and even if you tell him he's gonna screw it up, he won't even listen to you because he hates you, and he thinks that you're just trying to demur him from his just cause, and then he's gonna hang himself because that's literally both sides of the dialectic, is each side predicting exactly what the other side's going to do next, and the other side didn't want to happen, but it happened to me again, right? Self-awareness sort of deal.
Pulling the chair. And that's exactly what happened on the Wednesday, was that they kind of got to have the circus event they wanted. I think it probably went, at least initially, about as well as Trump thought it would. They made it inside the Capitol. They violated some things. And then that really showed people what they were really about, and people were horrified.
These self-declared patriots don't have disdain for government itself or the Capitol building itself, and the fact that there was a coup, the fire not only did the building not get burned down, there was petty vandalism. Somebody stole the podium, and otherwise the temple of democracy was left basically a little cluttered but unharmed, because these are Trump supporting Democrats who love America so much they're fighting to say, right, they're not there with the intentions like, say, people who occupy a building that is run by the bad guys or the oppressors or the fascists, right? No one who was storming the Capitol building had anything but reverence for the ground that they were walking on to begin with. They just, it was all very contingent on whatever the hell they thought they were doing, which was, what Trump thinks is going on.
Yeah, talk about aphorisms. I said this when Trump got in. I just went up to every political activist, aware friend, and I goes, why aren't we storming the castle? And here, as he's going out, the castle was stormed. I'm like, holy fuck, what did I say? But let's go back one step.
I'm going to go, actually.
Okay.
But was my sound okay? I got a note on my machine saying that my microphone was noisy. How was my sound on your end?
You sounded great here. It pops up every once in a while. But okay. Rob, we're going to close out without you, but I wanted to give this line.
I mean, if you're close, I'll stick with you. I want to.
No, I just got a couple lines.
We need a drink after this conversation, Jerry.
Yeah. And it was like our films did do this. My Dinner with Andre and Swimming Cambodia. These did this and raised the awareness level. And it's like you flip AI, which everybody's freaked out about, into IA, which is integral awareness or inclusive awareness. And you brought up the word stumble. That's it. How do we turn a stumble into a dance? That's what Buster Keaton did. He looks like he was falling and you turn it into a dance. So I got 2 lines to end with. Gentlemen, very important. Communication of the new is a miracle, but not impossible. You've both enlightened me with a lot of communication of the new tonight. And I learned this line from Norman Lear today. Each man is my superior in that I may learn from them. So thank you for teaching me tonight, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, pleasure.